That was financial services company Primerica ringing the closing bell today at the markets. I'm joined now by Jeff Yastine, Newsmax Editorial Director of Financial Newsletters with the daily closing bell report. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing fine, Rick, and I wish I had something better to say today about the markets, but another down day. We had the Dow finishing down around 80 points. The NASDAQ lost about 20, and then we had the S&P 500 losing about 8. So suffice to say, it's a fairly nervous market out there, Rick.
Jeff, how much of this is a result of what happened last night when the futures markets kind of had this weird, unusual freak out where it dropped about 1.8% in a matter of seconds, it seemed?
Yeah, and that goes to what I was saying. It's a nervous market, and overnight in Asian trading, there was a huge move to the downside. And whether that overnight futures drop that you were talking about in our markets, which was like after hours electronic trading, whether that triggered what happened in Asia or it was the other way around, nobody will ever find out. But there's just a lot of money moving around and a lot of very nervous, itchy trigger fingers out there.
Yeah, I think actually I was a little bit heartened, I must tell you. I thought we'd see a really bad opening this morning, but it did seem like the futures market recovered a bit before we got to the open, yes?
It did, definitely. And today, we saw at its worst, the market was down around 200 points and then rebounded. It seems like overall the S&P 500 in particular is trying to find like a certain technical level. Like today, it got down to about 2048 before rebounding. Last week, at its worst, it was down to about 2045. So you could presume perhaps it is trying to carve out some kind of a bottom here. But again, like you saw in that overnight move that we talked about in the futures trade, we just don't really know. The big thing here, Rick, is that coming up on Friday is the big March monthly employment report, and everybody's trying to make their bets regarding whether it's going to be worse than expected or better than expected.
Well, what I saw this morning, the private company numbers, I'm spacing the name of the company that does it, but those numbers were not looking very good, so I think there's some concern for that. I do want to ask you about oil prices today. They did rebound some, didn't they?
They did. We saw it finish up around, I think about 2.5%. I can't remember now myself, I'm drawing a blank, 2.5% or 5%, but it finished up around $50 a barrel.
I'll help you out with that. It was 5%.
Okay, there you go. So finished up, it was about $50 a barrel. And what was going on there was, there's a weekly crude oil inventory report that the government puts out, and everybody was expecting to see this very enormous build. Some were expecting as much as 5.2 million additional barrels to have been built up in those inventories, and instead it came in still at a record number, but at only 4.2 million barrels. So it was one of those things where the bad news was good news because so much of it had already been discounted.
Let me also take you to this topic because this is something I think we're going to be hearing more and more about as it generates some concern, and that is what appears to be a bit of a tailing off of manufacturing activity in the United States.
Yes, and that's some data that came out from what's called an ISM survey that came out this morning. The big question is it due to the harsh winter that we're seeing up north and in the Midwest, or is it something that's more like noise? So we'll have to see on that one.
Jeff, as always, much appreciated. I hope you have a good night tonight. We'll hear back from you tomorrow. In the meantime, you can find more financial news by going to Newsmax.com and clicking the finance button at the very top of the page. There's an article that you'll find particularly interesting on what's happening with oil. A rise of 5% in a given day is not something to be missed. I think it was the most significant thing we saw happen today, and you're going to want to follow that. So that's finance news for the day. You can find this at Newsmax.com, and you can click on the finance icon to read more. Up next, Give Me 5.